Malik Jackson never expected his life to collide with someone like Imani Westbrook. He had just graduated from a small college in Atlanta, hustling at his first IT job and sharing a cramped apartment with 2 roommates. Imani, on the other hand, was wrapping up her teaching degree and came from a family that knew luxury like it was normal. Her father owned several luxury car dealerships in Georgia, and her mother ran a high-end fashion boutique in Buckhead. They met at a summer cookout, hosted by a mutual friend. Malik was standing by the grill, cracking jokes about burnt burgers, when Imani walked up with a smile that stopped time. She was warm, easy to talk to, and had a laugh that wrapped around your soul like a favorite song. From the first conversation, Malik knew. He was done. They started dating fast and the connection ran deep. Malik didn't have fancy clothes or a new car, but he had dreams and drive. Imani saw that, and for a while that was enough. A year later, Malik proposed to her, under a blooming magnolia tree in the same park where they used to picnic. Imani said yes without hesitation. But not everyone was thrilled. From day one, Imani's parents, and especially her father, Mr. Vernon Westbrook, didn't think Malik was on their level. They never said it outright. It was the sideways comments. "So Malik, what's your 5-year plan? You know, Imani's used to a certain standard of living." He took it in stride because he loved Imani, and she always stood by him. But everything changed when they started planning the wedding. One night after dinner at her parents' estate, Mr. Westbrook pulled Malik aside into his home office. The shelves were lined with books that looked untouched, and the smell of cigar, smoke hung in the air like intimidation. He handed Malik a folder thick with documents. "This is just a formality, son. It's to protect Imani's future. I'm sure you understand." Malik didn't, not even close. That formality was a prenuptial agreement, one that said if he and Imani ever divorced, he'd walk away with nothing but whatever he earned on his own. None of her inheritance, none of the properties, none of the businesses, not even joint assets unless he proved his sole ownership. It was legal armor for a war he never planned to fight. He took the papers home and read every word with a storm growing in his chest. It wasn't just about money. It was about trust, or the lack of it. When he brought it up to Imani, she sighed. "Malik, it's not a big deal. It's just paperwork. It doesn't change how I feel about you." But it did. It changed everything. She seemed caught between loyalty to him and obedience to her parents. Malik didn't want to force her to choose. So, against his pride, he signed. He told himself it didn't matter. He wasn't marrying her for money. He was marrying her because she made him feel seen, loved, whole. Looking back now, that was his first mistake, thinking love alone would make her parents accept him. Their wedding was a blend of 2 worlds that refused to mix. Malik's family, his father a retired bus driver, his mother a church nurse, came dressed in department store suits and Sunday best hats. Imani's side looked like a fashion spread from GQ and Essence. There was no shouting, no scenes. Just tension, thick as syrup, hanging over every toast and photo. Still, Malik tried to smile through it. He had the woman he loved. That had to be enough. But the prenup? That silent agreement lingered like a ghost in the background. And as Malik would soon learn, some ghosts never stay buried. After the wedding, Malik and Imani settled into a tiny 2-bedroom apartment in South Atlanta. The walls were thin, the floors creaked, and the kitchen light flickered if you turned on the microwave. But it was theirs. Imani landed a job teaching 2nd grade at a local public school. Malik kept grinding at his entry-level IT job for a small tech company. They weren't rolling in money, but they were happy. They cooked together, watched old sitcoms on a hand-me-down couch, and saved every dollar like it was sacred. Still, her parents never let them forget what they lacked. Every holiday dinner came with backhanded comments. "Oh, you still haven't upgraded your car, Malik? Imani, are you sure you don't want us to help with a down payment on a nicer place?" They said it with smiles, but Malik heard the judgment in every syllable. He didn't say anything. He just worked harder, quietly. That prenup, that cursed piece of paper, was always in the back of his mind. Not because he wanted a dime from them, but because it reminded him every day that they didn't believe in him. And even worse, sometimes he wasn't sure Imani fully did either, but he stayed focused. One day at work, a coworker named Darius pulled Malik aside in the break room. "You ever thought about freelancing on the side, coding for startups? I just pulled in $5,000 this month alone." Malik blinked. "Wait, 5,000? In a month?" Darius showed him a screenshot of a direct deposit. It was real. That night, Malik opened his laptop and started teaching himself everything he hadn't already learned at work. Web development, APIs, cloud integration. Every weekend, every evening. He poured himself into it. Imani noticed. "Why? Are you always on that laptop? You already work full-time." "I'm trying to build something bigger, babe. Just trust me." She sighed, but she didn't fight him. Not yet. 6 months in, Malik landed a private client, a rising tech startup out of Charlotte. They needed someone to build their back-end infrastructure from scratch. It was a lot of work, but the pay made his eyes water. Even better? They offered him stock options. Imani was skeptical. "Stock? You really think that's going to be worth anything?" "I think it might change everything." Malik took the gig. He kept his day job, but now he was working 70-hour weeks. Weekends disappeared. Movie nights turned into Malik typing code until 2 a.m. "Just a little longer," he kept saying. But deep down, even he wasn't sure how long he could keep it up. Then came the call. The startup had been acquired by a major tech firm. Malik's stock options, suddenly worth 6 figures. In 1 week, he paid off their car, cleared student loans, and put a down payment on a home in a quiet neighborhood outside the city. Imani stood frozen in their old kitchen, staring at the numbers. "On the check, is this real?" she asked. Malik smiled. "Real as it gets." The next day, he quit his IT job. When his manager asked, "Are you sure you want to walk away from this?" Malik simply said, "I'm walking toward something better." And for the first time in his life, he meant it. Malik's first move after quitting his job wasn't what most people would expect. He didn't buy a flashy car or throw a party. Instead, he surprised Imani with something they'd talked about for years but never could afford: a week-long trip to Maui. They walked barefoot on beaches at sunrise, ate seafood by the water, and finally got to breathe. It was the first time in years Malik saw Imani genuinely relaxed. But even in paradise, his mind kept spinning. He had tasted the freedom of working for himself, and it was intoxicating. No one breathing down his neck. No clock to punch, just results. On the flight home, he looked at Imani and said, "I want to build something bigger." She smiled, half asleep. "You just did." "No," he replied. "That was the beginning." Malik had always had an eye for real estate. While other people scrolled social media, he was reading about property investment, rental yields, and asset growth. With the money from the startup acquisition, he launched his own property management company, Jackson Equity Group. At first, it was just him in a rented office with peeling paint. He cold-called landlords, knocked on doors, and handled every leaky faucet and tenant complaint himself. He read everything he could get his hands on: tax laws, contractor contracts, property codes. He took online courses, sat in investor meetups, and picked the brain of a retired property developer who lived 2 streets over from their new house. The grind was brutal, harder than anything he'd done before, and Imani wasn't thrilled. "You're never home anymore." "Neither were you when you were grading papers till midnight," he said gently. She didn't have a comeback for that. But slowly, Malik's hard work began to pay off. By the time he turned 30, Jackson Equity Group had over a dozen clients and multiple commercial units under management. He hired a small staff, moved into a modern office space, and finally started to breathe without worrying about the next bill. Malik had done it. Not with luck. Not with handouts. With grit. He felt proud. He assumed Imani's family would finally see him as an equal, but instead of respect, he got something else. Phone calls. "Hey Malik, I'm thinking of investing in a strip mall project downtown. What do you think?" her father, Mr. Westbrook, asked one day. At first, Malik was surprised and hopeful. Maybe this was a turning point. Maybe the old man finally saw him as a man worth talking to. But the questions kept coming. Then came the ask. Would you consider investing with me? You know, just to get the ball rolling. Malik paused. It was tempting, but the numbers didn't add up. The deal looked shaky. I'm not in a position to invest right now, Malik said politely. After that, the tone shifted. Mr. Westbrook grew colder, less friendly, more distant, Imani noticed. Did something happen between you and my dad? Malik just shrugged. Probably just business stress. But deep down, he knew the truth. Mr. Westbrook didn't like being told no. Meanwhile, Imani's mother had her own way of making things awkward. At Sunday dinners, she'd say things like, "We're not as young as we used to be, Malik. Sometimes I wonder how folks like you two manage to live so comfortably now." Malik smiled through gritted teeth. But that word luck echoed in his head like a slap. Luck? He had sacrificed everything, time, energy, sanity, to build their life. But once again, her parents made him feel like he'd never be enough. And as Malik would soon find out, the shadows of that prenup, the one he had signed to keep, peace, were about to rise again, this time with a storm behind them. The more Malik succeeded, the more uncomfortable things became. What should have been a celebration of growth and perseverance turned into a new chapter of manipulation and pressure, all centered around that same old piece of paper. The prenup. It hadn't been mentioned in years. It sat in a drawer, untouched, gathering dust and irrelevance. But suddenly Imani's parents couldn't stop bringing it up, dressed in smiles, dipped in guilt. One evening, while cutting into a perfectly grilled steak at their dining table, Mr. Westbrook leaned over with a rehearsed calm. "You know, Malik, I've been thinking. That agreement we had you sign before the wedding, it's probably outdated now, don't you think?" Malik froze, fork in midair. Imani stared down at her plate like the mashed potatoes were suddenly fascinating. Malik swallowed, composed. "What about it?" "Well," Mr. Westbrook continued, "you've done well, real well. Built a life for my daughter, I respect that. But that document, it feels unnecessary now, don't you think?" Before Malik could answer, Mrs. Westbrook chimed in. "It's not about control, Malik. We just think things should evolve. You're family now." Family. That word hit him like a bruise that had already healed but still throbbed when touched. He looked to Imani, silently pleading for her to say something. Anything. But she didn't. She stayed quiet. That silence, cut deeper than any contract. "I don't see a reason to change it," Malik said, his voice firm but calm. "It doesn't affect our daily lives. It's just a file in a cabinet." Mr. Westbrook's smile tightened. Mrs. Westbrook gave Imani a long look, the kind that spoke volumes without a word. The conversation died after that, but Malik felt something shift. On the way home, he turned to Imani. "You didn't say anything back there?" She sighed and looked out the car window. "Because I don't want to be stuck in the middle. You know how my parents are." "And what about us?" Malik asked. "What about our marriage? Why are they so focused on something that hasn't mattered in years?" She didn't have an answer, just a vague, "Don't stress about it." But he did stress, because over the next few weeks the pressure got worse. Mr. Westbrook would drop little hints. Mrs. Westbrook made side comments about how things look. Imani, once neutral, started sounding different too. "You know you have nothing to lose by getting rid of it," she said one night while folding laundry. "This isn't about trust," Malik replied. "It's about your parents still trying to control our lives like I never earned a seat at this table." "That's not fair," she said, visibly frustrated. "They just care about me. About us." Malik stared at her, feeling more alone in their home than ever before. He had built a life. He had earned every inch, and now the very people who once demanded legal protection against him wanted to strip that away, the moment he became successful. It wasn't about love, it was about access, and Malik knew. They were coming for his legacy next. The tension between Malik and Imani had reached a slow, simmering boil. What used to be subtle pressure had turned into daily friction. What used to be whispered suggestions had become thinly veiled ultimatums. "You keeping that prenup just makes it seem like you don't trust me," Imani said one night, folding her arms. "And tearing it up just because your parents asked would make me look like a fool," Malik replied. "So now it's about your pride?" "No," he said. "It's about boundaries. And it's about not letting them rewrite our story just because the ending isn't what they expected." That fight ended in silence, like most of them did lately. Malik knew something had to give, so he suggested they take a weekend trip to the river cabin, the one they used to visit during better times. Before the prenup, before the pressure, before the silence. Imani agreed, but her body language said otherwise. When they arrived, the cabin was exactly as Malik remembered. Quiet, tucked in the woods, and still echoing with old laughter. For the first evening, they cooked together like they used to, talked about nothing, pretended for a moment that life was simple again. But the tension hovered, quiet, steady, waiting. And the next morning, as they sat on the dock with coffee in hand, Malik knew it was time. "I need to ask you something, Imani," he said, looking out at the water. "Is this about us, or is this really about your parents?" Imani didn't answer right away. She stared at the ripples in the river. "This is about us," she finally said. "They're not controlling me. I'm saying the prenup doesn't make sense anymore. I'm not reading off a script." But Malik didn't believe it. "Come on, Imani, you and I both know your parents started this conversation. They're the ones who made me sign it. Now they want it gone. That's not coincidence, and that's a plan." Imani turned to him sharply. "Do you even hear yourself? You talk like they're villains, like they've never had our best interest at heart." "Best interest?" he scoffed. "Since when does tearing up a legal agreement to protect me count as best interest?" "You're so paranoid," she snapped. "No, I'm aware. There's a difference." Then she dropped the line that broke something in him. "Maybe the issue isn't them, Malik. Maybe it's you. Maybe you're so wrapped up in your own insecurity that you can't see how unfair this is to me." He stood up, stunned. "Insecure? I mean, if you really trusted me." "Don't," he cut in. "Don't act like this is about me not trusting you. Your parents put a wall between us from the start, and now you're blaming me for not tearing it down on command?" She shrugged, cold and casual. "If you can't trust me now, maybe we shouldn't be talking about a future together." Malik's jaw tightened. That hit him hard, but he didn't flinch. "So this is where we are? Threats?" "It's not a threat," she replied. "It's the truth. If you're so obsessed with that prenup, maybe you're waiting for me to mess up so you can walk away with everything." Malik's voice turned quiet but sharp. "Don't twist this. I built everything we have with blood, sweat, and sacrifice. No handouts, no shortcuts. I protected us because clearly nobody else would." She said nothing, just stared. He walked away from the dock and into the cabin, heart pounding. The rest of the weekend was silent, cold. When they packed up and drove home, it felt like they weren't even in the same car, just two strangers sitting in the ruins of a life they used to dream about. And Malik knew this wasn't just about paper anymore. It was about power, and he was done giving it away. Malik thought things had already hit rock bottom. He was wrong. The following Wednesday, he came home from a late property showing. He opened the door and stopped cold. Sitting in his living room were Imani, her parents Vernon and Denise Westbrook, and her younger sister Zara. They looked like they were waiting for a court hearing. "What's going on?" Malik asked, closing the door slowly behind him. Vernon stood up like this was his house. "Malik, we've been talking. This prenup situation, it's tearing the family apart. We can't keep living like this." Malik narrowed his eyes. "Last I checked, this is a marriage, not a board meeting." He looked at Imani. She didn't meet his gaze, just sat there staring at the floor. He turned back to the group. "I've made my position clear. The prenup stays. This isn't up for discussion anymore." That's when Denise stepped in, her voice dripping with performance. "You're being unreasonable, Malik. Imani has given everything to this marriage, and all you're doing is treating her like she's disposable. Malik's jaw tightened. Disposable? I've built a life for us while dealing with your constant interference. With all due respect, Denise, this isn't your business. It's ours. She didn't back down. It becomes our business when it affects our daughter. If you cared about her, you'd see how much this is hurting her. Before he could speak, Vernon delivered the blow. You're not the only one with options, Malik. If you can't see what's best for Imani, maybe this marriage isn't as strong as you think. The words weren't loud, but the threat in them screamed. Malik took a deep breath. So now you're saying if I don't hand over control of my life, I lose my wife? He shook his head. You made me sign that prenup to protect your assets. Now that I have something worth protecting, you want to erase it? The room fell silent. That's when he noticed Zara shifting awkwardly on the couch. She looked like she didn't want to be there. Malik filed it away. Finally, he said, "Y'all need to leave." No shouting, no drama, just firm and final. They left, all except Imani. That night, they had one of the worst fights of their entire relationship. "You're selfish," she yelled. "You care more about your bank account than your wife." "No," he said. "I care about not being manipulated. I'm not a bank, I'm your husband, or I thought I was." She grabbed a bag and stormed out. "I'm going to my parents for a few days." He didn't stop her. The next morning, Malik was nursing a headache and a heart full of doubt when his phone buzzed. Zara. They barely talked outside of family gatherings. Her name flashing on his screen felt strange. She sounded nervous. "Can we meet? I really need to talk to you." "In person." Malik agreed. They met at a quiet cafe. Zara looked like she hadn't slept in days. She kept looking over her shoulder like someone had followed her. "I overheard something," she finally said, "and I think you deserve to know." What she said next made Malik's world tilt sideways. During a recent dinner at the Westbrook home, Zara had overheard a conversation she wasn't meant to hear. They said the prenup has to go before Imani see. "Files for divorce," Zara whispered, hands shaking. "They've been planning it for months." Malik's stomach dropped. "What?" "She's seeing someone else," Zara said quietly. "They all know. That's why they're pushing so hard. If she divorces you with the prenup in place, she gets nothing." Malik sat in stunned silence. Zara reached across the table. "I didn't want to believe it either, but they were talking about spinning it, making you look like the villain so she could come out clean." He finally spoke, voice flat. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because you don't deserve it. You've always treated Imani with love and respect, and watching my family scheme like this, I can't be part of it. I won't." He nodded, slowly. "Thank you, Zara. I won't bring you into it, but I needed to hear this." She left, and Malik sat there for a long time, staring out the window, trying to hold in the hurricane building inside him. Everything made sense now. The sudden pressure, the silence, the change in Imani. And for the first time in a long time, Malik didn't feel hurt. He felt ready. The game had changed, and he wasn't playing defense anymore. After his meeting with Zara, Malik went home in a fog. He didn't cry. He didn't rage. He just opened his laptop and started digging. He combed through every shared account he had with Imani, every credit card, every bank statement. What he found confirmed everything Zara had said. Charges from restaurants in Midtown he'd never been to. Hotel stays during weekends when she'd claimed to be visiting friends. Jewelry store transactions he hadn't made. It wasn't just suspicion anymore. It was proof. Malik printed everything, sorted it into folders, and called his lawyer the next morning. They met in a sleek office downtown. Malik laid out the evidence like he was presenting a case to a jury. The lawyer listened carefully, nodding. "You have a solid position here," she said, flipping through the documents. "Infidelity, financial secrecy, and a clear motive to invalidate a legally binding agreement. This won't be a fight. This will be a formality." Malik didn't smile. He wasn't celebrating. He was grieving. Not for Imani. She had made her choice. But for the version of their life he had believed in. When he finally confronted her, she didn't even try to deny it. Tears welled in her eyes the second he pulled out the printed records. "I was lonely, Malik," she said, voice trembling. "You were always working, always gone. I didn't know how to reach you anymore." He didn't shout. He didn't throw things. He just stood there and replied, "You don't get to blame me for your choices. I was out there building a future for us, the life you're living in right now. And while I was doing that, you were planning your exit behind my back." She tried guilt. "If you had just listened. If you'd made more time." "No," Malik interrupted. "You made time for someone else, and now you get to live with that." When he told her he'd already filed for divorce, her face fell apart. At first, she was shocked. Then came the begging. "We can fix this, please. Counseling, prayer, whatever you want. We can start over, Malik. Just give me a chance." He shook his head. "No, Imani. You didn't just betray me. You tried to take from me, after everything I built. You were willing to lie, manipulate, and destroy everything we had just to walk away richer. That's not love. That's business, and I don't do business with people who lie." The divorce moved faster than anyone expected. Malik's lawyer handled everything like clockwork. The evidence of Imani's infidelity combined with the rock-solid prenup her family had once insisted on made the case nearly effortless. When the papers were finalized, Malik didn't feel joy. He felt peace. Imani walked away with nothing. No alimony. No claim to the properties. No slice of the company he had built from the ground up. Just her clothes and whatever jewelry her parents had gifted her over the years. And, when the dust settled, the truth about the Westbrooks started to surface too. Turns out their picture-perfect life had been cracking for a long time. The car dealerships, losing money for years, the boutique, running on loans and image. Their flashy lifestyle was smoke and mirrors, funded by borrowed time and mounting debt. That's why they wanted the prenup gone so badly. It wasn't just about Imani. It was about access. They thought Malik's success was their backup plan, but now their plan was ashes. Imani moved back in with her parents, back into her childhood bedroom. The fancy clothes disappeared, spa days vanished, dinner parties stopped. Her side of the world shrank overnight. And the man she'd been seeing on the side? Gone. Zara told Malik the truth a few weeks later. He ghosted her the second she told him you filed. He was never serious, just stringing her along while she was married to a man with real value. Malik just nodded. No smugness, no gloating, only silence. He kept in touch with Zara. Out of everyone, she was the only one who had shown him honesty. She apologized again for her family's behavior. "You don't have to keep saying sorry," Malik told her. "You did the right thing. That's all that matters." Life quieted down. The calls from Vernon and Denise stopped after Malik ignored a string of ranting voicemails. His lawyer told him to save them, just in case. But they never tried anything legal. They had no grounds, no leverage, no more control. Then, one day, weeks after the divorce had been finalized, Imani showed up, unannounced. She barged into Malik's office, ignoring his assistant's attempts to stop her. Her hair was a mess. Her clothes were wrinkled. The desperation clung to her like perfume. "Malik, please," she said, tears sliding down her cheeks. "I made a mistake. I lost everything. I just want you back." Malik leaned back in his chair, calm as ever. "No, Imani. You didn't make a mistake. You made a series of choices, and you made them knowing exactly what you were doing." She tried everything, apologies, promises, begging, even hints of romance. "We can fix this. We can be happy again." But Malik's face didn't change. "You weren't in love with me, Imani. You were in love with what I built. And now that you can't have it, you came crawling back." Her tone shifted. "You're going to regret this, Malik. You're going to end up alone, and you'll realize you pushed away the one person who really cared." He stood up and walked around the desk. "No. The one person who really cared walked out the moment she saw dollar signs. And now, you get to figure out who you really are. Without me." Then he called security. Calmly. That was the last time he saw her. After Imani was escorted out of his office, Malik didn't feel triumphant. He didn't post a victory quote or blast music in his car. He just exhaled. The storm was over, and in its silence, he finally heard himself think. He spent the next few weeks cleaning up what was left, emotionally, financially, spiritually. He went to therapy, not because he was broken, but because he was ready to grow. Everything you built was real, his therapist told him one day. But now it's time to rebuild something for you, not just to prove them wrong. Malik took that to heart. He expanded Jackson Equity Group, hired a COO, and gave himself the freedom to step back. He bought a piece of land outside the city where he could walk barefoot in the grass and listen to jazz without interruption. He started cooking again, reading again, smiling again. He even started volunteering on weekends, mentoring young black tech hopefuls from underfunded schools, kids who reminded him of himself. Ambitious, underestimated, hungry. Zara, who stayed. In touch, dropped by his office one afternoon. She brought him a small plant. "It's a peace lily," she said. "Thought you could use some peace." He laughed. "That's the best thing anyone's brought in here in months." She smiled shyly. "You ever get tired of talking business? I know a rooftop cafe that does open mic on Fridays." He tilted his head. "I might just take you up on that." Zara wasn't part of some rebound fantasy. She was her own woman, quiet, honest, and grounded. If something grew between them, Malik knew it would be real. No secrets, no contracts. No performance, just truth. Word around town was that the Westbrooks were sinking fast. Vernon sold off most of his car lots. Denise shut down her boutique. Imani had started applying for jobs, but nothing stuck. Malik didn't celebrate their fall. He didn't wish them pain, but he didn't save them either. They made their choices, and Malik? He stood by his. He had lost a marriage, yes, but he found something else, something rarer. Self-respect, control, freedom. Months passed, seasons turned, and for the first time in years, Malik wasn't living for anyone's expectations but his own. He no longer checked his phone with dread. No more side glances, no more rehearsing defenses in his head. Just clean mornings, quiet victories, and a deeper kind of joy. The world didn't fall apart when Imani left. It rearranged itself. His business continued to grow, but now he managed it on his terms. He built a scholarship fund for underprivileged black students pursuing tech careers. He sat on panels and spoke at conferences, not for applause, but to light a path for the next kid who came from nothing. He even started teaching a Saturday class on financial literacy and asset protection for black families, because he knew what it felt like to be underestimated, overlooked, and nearly taken for everything you've built, and people listened. Because Malik didn't speak with bitterness, he spoke with clarity. He bumped into Vernon once at a charity gala. The man was thinner, quieter, wearing the kind of humility that comes from watching your empire turn to ash. They exchanged a brief nod. No anger, no words, just a silent acknowledgement that the tables had turned, and Malik wasn't the same man they once tried to control. Later that night, Zara joined Malik at his table, fresh from performing a poem about resilience. They clinked glasses, laughed at an inside joke, and just for a moment, Malik felt something he hadn't in a long time. Hope, not the kind built on fairy tales or forced love, but the kind that rises when you know who you are, what you've survived, and what you'll never allow again. He looked at Zara, then out at the city skyline. Black brilliance glowing against a backdrop that once tried to dim his light. Everything he had, he earned. Everything he lost, he survived, and everything he'd become. That was his greatest victory of all, because Malik Jackson didn't just reclaim his life, he redefined it, on his name, on his terms, and in his light.